share, and of course he's offered to stick around after the meeting for anyone who would like some one-on-one time. So I'd like to introduce Spencer to come up. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Spencer. I'm a grateful member of Al-Anon.
Hey Spencer.
Thanks for having me out of your group tonight. And I refer to you guys as a group rather than a meeting because there is a difference. Meetings are a place sometimes where people, just transient members, come and go. There's not really any fellowship. There's no sense of unity within the room, and I can feel that here. There's a sense of unity. There's recovery. We got trusted servants talking about the point where money and spirituality do mix within these rooms, and we find a way to do that. And obviously, you guys are practicing traditions, and I've got to work the 12 traditions with my sponsor and learn how to apply those not only within the rooms of Al-Anon, but in my relationships. They're great if you can learn to apply them. And one thing that I'm quite clear on is there's one ultimate authority in my romantic relationship, and it's not me. And it's good to have that. And there's the common welfare of relationships. When I think about that, like what's the common welfare between me and people I interact with? And when I can bring that into those relationships, I usually have really healthy relationships. And I'm somebody, I know, Joanne mentioned that I'm another member of another fellowship, but I'm not going to touch on that at all tonight. Because I know there's people that come in here that are affected by the alcoholics and the addicts in their life, and and they're trying to get away from them. And we've seen this guy stand up here, and I'm not the enemy. I belong in Al-Anon. You're going to hear my story and think, man, like God was like coming up with 12-step programs, and he's like, I'm going to make it for that guy, Spencer. And somewhere down the line, but I fought tooth and nail to come in here. I had people come in for years like, maybe you should check out Al-Anon. I'm like, I'm good, and so I just didn't think I needed. I think I had the delusion of control that a lot of us have for many years that keeps us out of these rooms. Like, I got this, and I certainly, I certainly had the childhood that no one should have, that no child should have. I was born to two heroin addict parents, a lot of dysfunction, a lot of things going on in my home, and it was one of those things where I was, my parents were addicted from the moment I was in the womb, and I was not given what I was needed. I hear people sometimes share an Al-Anon, and I'm always confused because they're like, everything looked really good on the outside from my home. Like, things did not look good from the outside in my home. Like, everyone knew, like, things were going down in that house. And, and I was aware of it too, and it was like I was really embarrassed of my family went on from a very young age. We often, like, the police were getting called constantly, people were ODing and dying in my house. And, and I would see this, and I would go to my mom or my dad and be like, what's wrong with so-and-so? What happened? And the feedback I'd get from the adults in my life was, nothing, baby. Everything's fine. And so what I did from very I learned to stop trusting this, because I would get these feelings of like, something is very wrong. And the feedback from the adults was like, everything's fine. And so it was really confusing. I felt, what I got from that was these really warped perceptions, and I lived in a lot of fear. I've always lived in a ton of fear, and what that did for me as an Al-Anon, the alcoholic takes that first drink to get that sense of relief. And for me, I try to control things in my life so I can get everything just hanging in its moment for one moment. I can take that deep breath, and I can be okay. And then I'll just spend the rest of my time trying to get it back into that place. And I used to exert a lot of energy managing and controlling my life and other lives around me as best I could, and it didn't lead to a lot of healthy relationships. And so, in that home, there was a lot of physical violence. My dad would watch me, and I'd walk into the room, and he'd have a needle in his arm, and I couldn't wake him up. I knew 911 from a very early age. My parents were constantly getting arrested. I remember I went and visited my dad this weekend in San Diego, and I hadn't seen him in a couple of years because my dad, he's 69 years old and he's still struggling with the disease of alcoholism. And I'm here to tell you that if someone in your life is an alcoholic, you can find happiness and serenity if they're not sober, or not. And so, and to tell you the truth, I had a wonderful weekend with that man. He was. So I've learned in Al-Anon that my job is to be his son. That's the only role I can play in that man's life. I can't get him sober. I can't sponsor him. I can't lead him to a spiritual awakening. I can't lead him to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I can be his son. And there were moments that I knew he was sky high. We were having one-on-one conversations. He was nodding out. But I didn't have to call him on it. I didn't have to tell him, "Oh, Dad, you're high," because I've done that in the past. And I'll tell you what he did. He went downstairs and hid. And I spent the whole weekend with my stepmom. And so what I did is I just stayed present, let him have whatever he was doing. And the more I did that and stepped forward, the more he stayed present and did his best. And he's been giving me the best he can do the last several months. And that's why I went down there. He's been calling me once a week to check in, and I hadn't heard from him for about a year. He stopped calling me. And I'd reach out to him and he would return my calls. But, I had a great weekend, and like I said, he's 69 years old, and he's still shooting heroin, and who knows how many years I have left. So and Al-Anon is giving me the ability to have a relationship with my dad, and like I said, I left there happy, and that's a gift to Al-Anon. And I've also situations presenting itself with my girlfriend's brother. Again, he's relapsed on heroin. This past weekend, he lost his job on Friday, got 2 reckless drivings on Saturday, and then flipped his car on Sunday. And so it's, but again, it's, he doesn't think he has a problem. He's got it. Maybe he'll see a therapist, and that's where he's at, and I'm talking a lot to my sponsor right now because I'm having, one thing we learn out on is I've had to learn what's mine and what's not mine. You know what I mean? Because I'm the type of Al-Anon, I want to get up into everything. I want to hop in there and I'll like dive into the burning building of addiction, and I've learned a lot of it is not mine because no one's asking me for my opinion, and no one's been like, "Hey Spencer, what do you think?" And it's like often not like my sponsor when I first came in Al-Anon, he's like, "You're an opinion dispenser." He's like, "You're offering opinions to people that are not asking for them." And I'm one of the guys of, especially in Al-Anon, I think I'm helping you. You know what I mean? I'm helping. If you did it my way, you'd be doing much better. And I've learned that if people don't ask me for my opinion, I don't need to offer it. There's one, his dad is calling me and asking me, just my experience with alcoholism and my dad, what he should do. My advice was, check out Al-Anon. I said, maybe you should go to an Al-Anon meeting. I'd be happy to go to an Al-Anon meeting with you. I suggested maybe attending some open AA meetings to learn about the disease of alcoholism. That was important for me. You read out of the big book. One of my groups I attend, it's actually not an official Al-Anon meeting, but we read the big book from the Al-Anon perspective. We replace, drinking with obsessive thinking, alcohol for control. And it's funny how, when you switch those words on, how much it really matches up with what we got going on in here. I found as an Al-Anon, my thinking matches up with a lot. That obsessive thinking goes on with alcoholism, just on the allergy. And unfortunately, we don't get the relief that the alcoholic does from taking the drink, right? We don't get that, this just shut off. For me, I found that I had to have a spiritual experience to have some sort of relief from what goes on between my ears. And I can still have obsessive thinking today, right? But thank God that's why I have a second step, and that's why I help others. Because I find that this slows down just enough. If I can put someone else's stuff before mine, even for just a little bit each day, I can stop this a little bit. And so back to my childhood. Like I said, I don't say these things to try to scare you or have like gore, but I can stand before you that it happened, it sucked, but I've recovered from that childhood. And that's a miracle. That's a miracle of Al-Anon that, I can stand here and just report, this is what happened to me, and I've recovered from that. Because I know a lot of people that have had my childhood, and it's still, they're just living with that, the consequences, and they're 35, 45, 55 years old, and they're still just suffering from the wounds of their childhood. And so the gift is the 12 steps have offered me from relief from that. And I get to share my experience, strength, and hope from that and try to help others as best I can. There was sexual abuse in that home, and it's like stuff that I'm not proud to say. In fact, like I used to, like people, my first Al-Anon share, like I really wanted to vomit. It was so hard for me to talk about my childhood. I did not want to talk to anybody about it, but I find the more I get honest about it, and the more I share that with people, the more I can help others. That's what I have to offer you guys. That's it. My experience, strength, and hope. And so, but I'm here to tell you that, Alcoholics Anonymous does work. My mom went to a 6-month treatment facility, and, she came out a new mom. I went to go live with her when I was 7 years old. In between there, I lived with my aunt and uncle, and that was a tough transition. They're wonderful people, but I went from living with 2 junkies to fundamentalist Christians. And, so that was abrupt, but it was, I have no problem with fundamentalist Christians, but it was like I was living in like utter chaos to like, you can't leave the table until you've eaten your vegetables. And I'm like, I haven't seen a vegetable up until this point. Like, what is going on? But what I got in that home though was like love, attention, kindness. They signed me up for team sports, which I played all through my childhood, and I found a lot of like, I don't know, it's like I love team sports because it's perfect for an Al-Anon, right? There's boundaries, there's rules, you play a position, like it's just organized. Like I love that. Like more organization, the better for a guy like me. And so I found a lot of comfort, and I had a measure of talent, so it was like, I got attention again, some attaboys, and some build my self-esteem, and so I went back to live with my mom, and she worked in an AA program. Alcoholics Anonymous gave me my mom back, and she ended up dying with I think 20 years of sobriety, and I'm so grateful for that. And I had super mom growing up from that point on, and I know that she carried a lot of guilt for what her role was in my childhood, but it's just like I remember on her when she was dying, I just thanked her. Like she showed up, and and I was that annoying kid in the back of meetings playing with toys, and but it was I was an AA brat, and I'm grateful for that. And so yeah, then growing up, I was my picker was very broken in romance. I very much like alcoholic women, because let's face it, they're very entertaining. You know what I mean? Like they're very interesting. It's like, I don't know who I'm gonna wake up to that it's the same woman, but it's like, what am I gonna get each and every day? And and it's I'd get pint glasses tossed in my head, some agility drills, and I had girlfriends that stole my checks and would say I didn't do that. I'm like, honey, that's your handwriting. They print them out online now, and but I would stay with them. I would hang in the pocket with these women, and my sponsor joked, he's like, you will hang in a rotting carcass of a relationship, won't you? Like, because I just have this utter fear of being alone. I'll accept terrible just so I don't have to be with myself. And I've gotten much better. I've got to work the steps surrounding that, but. And it's like I dealt with the unmanageability of dealing with alcoholic women. I remember in the county I live in, if the police get called so many times for domestic disputes, somebody's got to go to jail. And I ended up spending a night in jail because of domestic disputes, and I was mortified of that fact. It came down to the fact they looked at me and looked at her, and she's like this big, and they're like, come on, and but again. Like that's what I'll accept for love, or what I thought was love. And it's funny. I eventually, I say I didn't find this woman. I lucked into a really good girl, and I don't know what she saw in me, but she took a chance on me. We had things got healthy, and I learned to try to be in a healthy relationship. But she went and started nursing school, and she used some words that terrified me. And she said, I need some space. And what my thinking heard was, I'm leaving you, because everyone had always left me. My parents didn't show up, and and my mom had ended up actually passing away from hepatitis C. She contracted it through intravenous drug use, and she couldn't do any treatments because she put me through college, and I was my mom's primary caregiver at 22 years old, and again, like the good Al-Anon, I'm going to do this, and I really had no business doing that because I was not emotionally and physically capable of doing that, but again, I found this woman, and she said, I need some space, and so I grew up in a home, and I had no communication. Emotionally, I was a cripple. And so my best thinking was, well, I didn't exit gracefully. I set up another life, and I ended up, setting something up with another woman. And, for whatever reason, when I saw the look on that woman's face and breaking her heart and seeing her crying, I knew I had to start doing something different because all my relationships ended up like this. I'm the type of guy, I don't detach with love, which I learned in Al-Anon. I detach with an axe. And, and I just detached with an axe in another relationship, and, and I called this man that had seen me around for a long time, and he would always come up to me and be like, you ready for Al-Anon yet? And he did this, and I'm like, who the hell is this guy? Go away, and finally I had his number, and I just said, hey, I'm ready to look at Al-Anon. And he didn't say like, oh, okay, like I'll see you on Friday at 5:30, and by the way, I'm your sponsor. And that doesn't happen for everyone in here, but he's just like, he knew me, and he knew I was a really willful guy, and he said, I'm the only person north of San Francisco that can sponsor you. Trust me. It's like, I know you, and I've seen you. And I was like, all right, and sounds pretty serious here in Al-Anon, but, and I fell into a group. And we meet at 5:30 in Corte Madera on Friday nights, and it's like this group. There's a lot of enthusiasm. We have birthday night, so on the last Friday of the month, we celebrate Al-Anon birthdays. We give a cake. The sponsor says a few words about each other, and actually, I picked up 6 years last month, and I get to give a couple sponsees an Al-Anon cakes this month. And so, and it's, I'm reminded that, the only thing I've been asked in Al-Anon is to give it away. The guy was quite clear, the only thing anyone's, no money, I contribute to the 7th edition voluntarily, there's no rules in here, but, if you're in here and you're suffering because you're affected by the disease of alcoholism, meetings of Al-Anon are great. You will find some relief here, but if you want to find a solution for what's going on in your life, in your reaction to alcoholism, work the 12 steps. That's what's been suggested to me, and that's what's worked for me. And so we had this group, and we talk about the steps, and the first week of the month's a step, the second week's a tradition, and then we have a saying, and then we have birthday night. And so, like I said, those are the things that, for me, create a healthy group. And we also have anniversary night. We have a night of family recovery. That's where I really recommend you come. We fly in, usually an Al-Anon and AA speaker, usually family members, and they talk about their experiences from both sides. And it's really cool to see, and it's funny how different their perspectives are on the same situations, but the great part is there's recovery there on both sides. And they both get to, look at their parts and their perspectives and how they've been able to recover from the same disease. Because alcoholism is a family disease. It affects everyone it comes in contact with. And, I like the part, the big book about the family afterward, they call it the Al-Anon chapter, where it talks about, living with an alcoholic will make anyone neurotic. And it creates all these things in our lives. And, so when I came to Al-Anon with that man, and he got me in the steps right away, and I had to hang out in the first step for a really long time, because I would verbally admit powerlessness, but he would have me do these inventories, and my actions showed that I didn't think I was powerless. I continue to try to control people, places, circumstances. I would just try to affect results in my life with all my might. All my will would be going into just trying to manage situations in my life. And, and shockingly, I'd have zero serenity at the end of the day. And it's just like, he'd be like, Spencer, he's like, it's hilarious. You're around all these alcoholics and they're protecting, a lot of them were sober and they're protecting their sobriety with their life. And you're handing out your serenity like it's flyers on the street corner, it's like, I don't need it, you take it. And it's true. How often do I just hand over my serenity throughout the day to people that don't deserve it? And that's not, they're not at fault. That's my choice. And so it's, that first step in, talks about that unmanageability. Well, and I thought my life was manageable because I'd been to college, and he was just like, listen, let's look at the stats. Like, you have 0 healthy relationships in your life. You've never had a successful romantic one. You are just have these warped perceptions, and I was like, you're right. So we addressed that later on in the steps, but for me, the beginning of my spiritual journey was in the second step. And I love the wording is came to believe, right? And that suggests a process. And so, if you're in here and the whole God thing, it doesn't make any sense, and what do these steps have to do with my problem? Well, I'm here to tell you it has everything to do with your problem. And those 12 steps have had everything to do with all my problems today. And in my relationship with the power greater than myself that I choose to call God is far different than when I walked in Al-Anon 6 years ago. I have a much bigger God today, and for me it was just because I always would try to limit God in my life. I would try to I'll keep control over here, but God, you go handle this over here, and it doesn't work that way, at least for me. God has to be everything or it's nothing. I can't say God's in control and I'll have 2 fingers on the steering wheel, and it's and it's like he's kind of in control, but and it's like that second step was big for me, that process of surrendering my will in my life, that was a big thing for me, learning how to surrender. And if you look up the definition of surrender, it's you go to the winning side. Surrender was sounded so weak, but I got to this third step, and I've struggled with the third step throughout my time in Al-Anon because I'm a willful person, but for me, turning my will at that point was going through steps 4 through 9, was taking some action in Al-Anon and doing something, and in writing that 4th step, I put pen to paper, and I sat down and I wrote about all the times I was resentful, all the resentments in my life, and all my fears, and I got that down on paper. And then I remember I sat down on the top of Mount Tam, which is in Norton County with my sponsor, and it was 100 degrees. It felt like an interrogation rather than a 5th step. And but we went over it, and we went over the 3 C's. Did I cause it? Can I control it? Can I cure it? And of course, the answer was no to all those things. But my actions throughout all those resentments and all those relationships showed that I didn't believe that. I believed that I could cure it, I could control it. But the truth was, I looking at those names on that pages in those situations, I had very little control. And what I had control over was my reactions to these situations, to these people. And there's a 4C that he went over that was good for me. It's not a lyric, but it was, did I contribute? And I found often that in a lot of these situations, I did contribute to these resentments, to these situations. It wasn't, I always was pretty sure that other people were at fault in the things in my life. Even my dad, by all accounts, he was never going to win Father of the Year, but at some point, I took up the reins in that resentment. I was a bad son. There was things I said to my father that I would hope no one would ever hear. And I had to own that. It wasn't just my father's fault. I couldn't just point the finger. Because I was pretty sure he was the one that was at fault, and it wasn't true. And I got to put down these fears, and I was scared of everything and everyone. I was driven by these fears that I picked up in my childhood. It's that and that those old narratives will still play. The other day, about a month ago, for about a week, it was that I'm not good enough. You're gonna lose everything you got. You're a fraud. And I was like, where did this come from? You know what I mean? And it was just but I was able to recognize that. I was able to see it for what it was. It was just that old tape that I picked up from a very young age. You're not good enough. And I was able to put pen to paper. I wrote a bunch of 10 steps about it, and just saying I'm in fear, I'm insecure right now. And I just read it to my sponsor. Took the power out of that thought. Because I don't know about you, but if my obsessive thinking, if I sit with my thoughts, they become so big. And what happens for me is in Al-Anon, I start believing that narrative that goes through my head, and all of a sudden it becomes reality to me. And I start taking actions on that false narrative, and it's like, oh shit, pardon my French, but it's like, that's when problems arise, and so I did that 5th step, and I gave it up to God, and I got honest with another man really for the first time. I laid it all out there, and he'd been scribbling these things on paper, and I'm like, what is he writing? And I'm like, what is that? And he's all, this is your 6-step list. And I was just like, what? And he's like, and it was funny because he didn't have manipulative. He had superlatives like master manipulator. I see that in the literature, he's like selfish times 10. I'm like, all right, And so what it was is on those pages was who I really am, not who I thought I was. Because I found when I walked into here and by working the steps, there was a gap between the man I thought I was out in the world and the man I truly am. And and by working the 12 steps and having gone live, I get to try to marry that a little bit more each day and try to come closer for the ideal that I've set for myself. And so 6 and 7, I'm still working those today. I don't know about you, but I'm still saddled with some character defects. You know what I mean? And they, for me, because they get inflamed by self-centered fear. So when I get in fear throughout my day, it's like I have that choice. Do I want to go to my higher power and rely on this loving, infinite, powerful force, or do I rely on me? You know what I mean? Because that's my choice, and it's like, I think highly of myself, but I'm not infinite love, power, wisdom, and so it's getting through all that, and then, being willing to give it up, because it's like the 7th step doesn't say, we humbly ask him to lessen our shortcomings. It says to be removed. That means gone. And so for me, it's like, I'll settle for better. That's gotten better, and it's just like, it's still screwing up everyone's life, Spencer, get rid of it. And so for me, it's like I had to have that willingness. If I want to ask my higher power in the morning to relieve me these character defects, I have to do my part. I can't, I'd ask God to relieve me of lust, and then I can't just stare at women walking by me for 10 minutes. I can't ask them to relieve me of being dishonest and lie all day. It doesn't work that way. I have to practice some sort of contrary action if I want to see relief from my character defects. I have to be willing to participate in that process. And so hopefully by this point I gained some measure of humility, and I got that 8-step list, and oh man, it was 72 people long, and in some I was really willing and able to make amends to and come back, but that girl that I broke her heart, I really wanted to run up there and make amends, but that's not the spirit of the step. The spirit of the step is to take responsibility of my own actions and the well-being of others. And the reason I wanted to make amends to her was because I wanted to be relieved of guilt. And my sponsor knew that, and he was like, absolutely not. You're not making amends to that girl. Not right now. And it was fun. I got to make all my amends, and she was left out there for 2 years because she made it quite clear when we broke up she wanted no contact. And about the only thing I did right in that whole process was not contact her. I respected her enough that I did not try to reach out to her. And one day I saw her in a recovery setting, and my sponsor was like, you need to go thank her for her service because she's a member of the group, so you need to treat her as such. And I walked up to her, and we hadn't spoken in 2 years, and for whatever reason, I just said, hey, thank you for your service. And it was funny, she used to glare at me whenever I would see her. For whatever moment, I saw warmth in her face. And I said, I'd really like to make a formal amends to you. Are you willing to hear it? And I've been obsessing on this moment for 2 years, and I thought, she's like, no way. She's like, yeah, sure, what are you doing tomorrow morning? And I was like, whoa, it was like, tomorrow morning? I don't have time to practice, and it's, and I was like, all right, sure, and my sponsor was very clear, you're gonna spend, making amends, it's gonna be 15 minutes, and 4 hours later, I just got to sit and listen to her, and how I affected her, and and she said, she's like, I've been watching you, people pay attention, for us, and she said, I can see the man I was in love with, and I could see, everyone's saying you're doing a lot of work in Al-Anon, and you're growing and changing, and the miracle of Al-Anon truly is that I went from somebody that wouldn't speak to me, and now we're friends today. I get a smile from her when I see her. She speaks to me, she reaches out for me for advice, and my current girlfriend is totally comfortable with that, because I've been out in front with it and made sure she's okay, and she likes her, and so, yeah, relationships get repaired in here, and families do come back. I've seen a lot of miracles in Al-Anon, and like I said, even though my dad's not sober, I have a relationship with him, where for most of my adult life, I've had zero relationship with my dad. And I've had to learn to accept him for who he is. He's a sick man. He has a disease. If my dad had cancer, I wouldn't treat him poorly. But he's got the disease of alcoholism. He's not getting loaded at me. He's getting loaded because, it's a craving beyond his mental control. And so, for me, I live my life today as best I can in 10, 11, and 12. My life really changed when I did regular written inventories, like regular 10 steps. Because I put down on paper, like, where was I selfish, dishonest, resentful, and afraid? I don't know about you guys, but those come up for me, right? If you've done a 4-step, I'm sure like that didn't all get washed away from me, and if it did, like, awesome, and for me, like, I'm still saddled with these things. Like, every day something comes up for me that I need to write about, because I'm not the type of Al-Anon that can live with, like, I have trouble with this 24-hour period, let alone like yesterday, last week, last month, last year's worth of stuff, allowing me to be spiritually sick, and it's just like, I don't want to live like that. So what I do is I put pen to paper so I can be free. I heard the speaker talk about, I write 10 steps because you have to ask yourself, like, how free do I want to be? And I ask myself, like, sometimes when I don't want to write because I'm scared of what's going to come out, it's like, how free do you want to be? And for me, it's like, I can't, 10 and 11 go hand in hand. Like, when I do my morning routine, I have a definitive morning practice every day. Where I pray and I meditate, I read some spiritual books, and I read some Al-Anon literature. I like the Oct as my favorite daily reader. Courage to Change is a little fluffy for me, frankly, but it just is. It's the Odac's more like recovery, but I enjoy that. Just being honest. But I do that 11-step practice, and then I do some meditation before I go to bed. Because for me, that relationship with my higher power is the most important relationship in my life. I find that when I put like my girlfriend or my work relationships above that, everything gets all mismanaged and crazy, and all of a sudden it's tough. But when I put God first, like, all of a sudden, like, things become in line. And 12-step, I sponsor men. I think it's important to participate in other people's lives. Practicing principles in all my affairs, like, that's a daily thing, but it's not always easy. Like, I don't know about you, but like driving is really hard to practice the principles. Like, sometimes I'll like pray and meditate for like 20 minutes, feeling like all spiritual. I'll get behind the wheel and I'm flipping people off like 5 minutes later. I'm like, did I sleep God in my bedroom? Like, what happened? For me, honestly, I started praying, and then I would literally, no one was with me, I'd open my passenger door to let God in my car. Like, that's how bad it got at one point. But yeah, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. But for me, it's I still have to look out for sick thinking. My thinking can be very black and white, and what I've learned in Al-Anon is to operate in the gray. And I still to this day, like, I'll have a really great week with my girlfriend. We'll be really happy, and then come Sunday, she'll say a couple things I don't like, and my thinking is like, this relationship's been really good. It's been 3 years, but like, I think I'm done. Like, I'm thinking this in my head, and I'm like, we're good. We've tried really hard. You pissed me off a couple times today, and, you know, and it's like, I've learned that like that's insane, right? You know, like, to think that way, because I used to act on that. Like, I used to act on that thought, be like, I'm done, and I would tell them, and I'd have a lot of shocked looks on people's faces, like, what? You know, and I've learned that, you know, people aren't perfect, you know, and again, like, I've been able to apply the 12 steps. You know, my girlfriend is in recovery, so we have a common language, which is really nice. I've learned that she has a sponsor, I'm not it, you know, and she's learned one area is really, we've made our character defects outside issues. We don't discuss each other's character defects, we bring that to our sponsors. That's really helped, because I used to, under the guise of helping her, I would try to tell her what, you know, she was doing wrong and what she could do better. I've learned to use the words I feel in here. You know, I didn't use that for the first 31 years of my life. You know, it was like, that was like Mandarin Chinese for me. I feel. So I had no idea what I felt. That was the truth. You know what I mean? I'd be angry, but I didn't know that right underneath that anger was fear. You know, and it would just, so, you know, I've learned to just lovingly tell her if she's, you know, Quinn knows my girlfriend. She's literally 5'2", 105 pounds, and her personality is like 6'10". You know, she's a lively young woman, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Like, I love this girl, and she loves big too, and, you know, I can take a lot of what she says personally. You know, and it's like, the same thing is, I know who she is. We've been dating several years now, and it's like, I don't have to react to who I know she is. And, you know, and if I have an issue, I can, you know, like I said, I bring it to my sponsor, and if I need to talk about it, we talk about it. I don't need to talk about every single little thing that goes on in relationships. That's what I did. I'd want to sit down and talk about it. I want you to understand me. And if you didn't understand me, I'd explain it in a different way so you could understand me. You know, and so, you know, Al-Anon is a you know, good way to live, and for me, like I said, I needed to be here, and I still need to be here, and you know, I do a lot of service now, because it's my turn to give back. You know, learn about, you know, how, you know, the groups are at the top, and, you know, the more responsibility you have going down, the less glamour it is, but I love learning about service structure. Like, I've really gotten to grow in that and participate in, you know, protecting the message. Because for me, it's like, I don't want to, sometimes I hear people like come up to the podium and talk about like outside literature, outside issues. And for me as a newcomer, that'd be really, you know, confusing. Like, do I need to work the 12 steps and then read spiritual books? Like, is that how I recover? And it's like, no, like for me, it's just about 12 steps. And if you want to go seek outside spiritual help out from here, awesome. And it doesn't conflict with anything, and I have no opinion on that, but for me, I don't need to talk about any of that from here. You know, and I need to keep the message clear for when I walked in the door for the next person that walks through that. And through service, I get to protect that. And so, you know, I'm really grateful for you guys asking me to share tonight, and I look forward to hearing from you, so thanks.